What's up, boys? So today I'm going to be talking about a support and resistance. I would say zones and how it matches to ICC and how you can use it to ICC. First of all, I'll try to explain zones using a simple example. Now, this video was a request, and that's why I'm making it because I think people kind of confused a lot. Now, price moves in zones. If you are someone that is struggling with if you're someone that is struggling sorry if you're someone that is struggling with support and resistance, you're kind of confused about it, let's look at it as zones, right? Zones. You have this zone and you have this zone. The instance I like to break zones down is I like to use your roof and your floor. So let's say you are a human being and you are standing here. Let's say you are a human being and you are standing here. Now let me change that color a bit. And you were standing here as a human being. Now, when you want to go, let me draw this. Now, when you want to go up into the next floor, this is stopping you from going any higher, right? Let me draw this. Let me draw this. So, literally, this is stopping you from going any higher. So because this your roof stops you from going any higher, and because of that this roof becomes your resistance because it's preventing you from going higher. Meanwhile, the floor is stopping you from dropping down lower, right? So the floor is your support because it's stopping you from going lower. It's like it's supporting where you are standing on. It's not letting you fall, right? Price essentially moves in days. If it breaks one zone, it's probably trying to go for the next zone. If it breaks this zone, it's probably trying to go for the next one, right? And if it gets to this zone and it can't break this zone, it means that this zone is still strong enough, and most likely what you will see is price dropping back down here, right? So price essentially moves in zones. Breaks this zone, is going for the next one. Break this one, is going for the next one. So look at your zones as your roof and your floor. This is like layman explaining of how zones are, how zones work. Now, how does these zones relate to ICC? ICC, some people say it's support and resistance. It's not true, like it's not fully like that because usually support and resistance um is this hits here and goes, right? This is what they call support and resistance, right? So yeah, but ICC works more like it breaks here, then it comes deeper, and then it gets him back above. So it's not like for me, it's not fully support and resistance, I would say, but it the resistance and support plays a big role. Now, how do they relate to ICC? How do you tie zones to ICC? Now, what you have to understand is that when price made this indication here is essentially price showing you, giving you two zones, this zone and this zone, right? Price is just giving you two zones, this zone and this zone, showing you, hey, at this zone above here buyers have control so they can push price higher, but at this zone sales are here. So it gave you two zones. The same thing with zones. Now all we are waiting for in ICC is just to see that correction, right? And then back above this zone, if price breaks this zone, we get in. But if price hasn't broken this zone, we know that this zone is still stopping price from going higher. And that's why I'm not a full support of people entering trades under here, because this zone is stopping price from going higher. So until price breaks above the zone, price can't go any higher. But if it breaks above the zone, then it can keep going higher, right? Now, in terms of trading ICC and putting all these things in play and trading ICC, you are essentially, ICC is also that zone, right? It's also that moving in zone. You are simply buying price at one zone and expecting price to get to the next zone. But then at the part where we tend to hold trades longer, the reason why we tend to hold trades longer is, and that's where the trend come in, right? That's where the trend come in. Trend shows you the bigger picture of everything, which team is more in control, right? The trend just gives you a bigger picture of everything, which team is more in control. And once you find that trend and find that team that is more in control, you now start to look for zones that support that trend. That's where a lot of people make mistakes on it. They look for zones, they just look for zones, or they just look for support and resistance area where price is respecting and look to trade it. But they forget the fact that that zone that they are trading is not in sync or is not in support with the overall picture of what price is looking like, right? And that's where you start to get it wrong. So zones or support and resistance or ICC, you want to apply it to support the overall trend. That is when all these things start to be relevant for you, right? So how zones ties to ICC is literally, ICC is zones. It's just a new word that explains it in a way that it makes more sense, right? But it's fully based on zones. Price moving from one zone to the next zone, right? It breaks above this zone, it goes for the next zone. It corrects itself back above this zone, you know it's going for the next zone. If it breaks this zone, you know it's probably going for a higher zone, right? So that's literally what it's all about. Now explaining this with the charts, let me use Bitcoin for instance, right? Now Bitcoin, I saw some people got into some trade on Bitcoin. What was the trade? Now, I think the trade was something like this. Now, let me go in, pull it up. Now, is this a good trade? In terms of ICC, 100% it is a good trade because this is an indication, this is a correction, and back above here should be the continuation for price to keep going up, right? So, ICC, solid trade. But in terms of the trade supporting the overall trend, it's not a solid trade. So you see how using ICC can start to be a problem for you. I know some people will say, yeah, I got in here and I closed here. Yeah, today you did, but sometimes you may not get to this level, right? When you, or maybe if you're trying to swing, you can't call it a swing trade, yeah. So when you are trying to trade ICC and like hold trades for a couple of days or maybe catch big moves, you want your trades to be in support of the overall trend. I always, people forget the trend a lot. I don't know why. They price makes, they call this the indication and they say, okay, I expect price to give a correction, and then they are trading the correction and they forget that the overall trend is still bearish, right? So people kind of always don't rate overall trend, but I rate it highly because if the overall trend is not in support of your ICC setup, is likely not going to hold for long, right? Now see how BTC is starting to look like it wants to go down, right? It's starting to look like more like a downtrend right now. It's like, because overall trend is bearish. So your buys are short-term buys. Let me use another instance where let me say Nasdaq for instance. Let me use SPX because I traded SPX. I called that one. So on SPX, I did know I called a trade on SPX. That is the 4 hours. A trade on SPX here, right? Now, why would this indication correction and back under this level is price to continue going lower? Why would this hold this long? It is holding this long because if you look at the overall picture, price has been forming a downtrend. So you can say, it's safe to say that on the bigger picture it's on a downtrend. because on the bigger picture, price has been trying to switching trends. Price has switched trend, showing you that it wants to go down. So your trade, your ICC trade, is in sync with the overall picture of what price is painting for you. So for that reason, you can hold your trade longer, right? Let me go back to the for. For that reason, you can hold your trade longer and expect that price will keep going. But if you look at the case of let me use also gold. Right now, people are on gold. They are on gold above this level. They got into gold. But I'm like, hey, the overall trend is bearish. So this gold trade is probably not gonna be a long-term trade, in my personal opinion, because the overall trend is not in support of these short-term buys. So these buys here might just be a short-term buy, because if you look at the overall picture of what price is painting for you, this is a downtrend. Yeah, I know a lot of people expect to see a correction of price into the zone. That makes sense, right? But you being someone that is trying to catch big moves, you mustn't trade everything. There are some trades you kind of stay away from, right? There's some trades you kind of just sit out on that one because it's not in sync with the overall trend. And even if you must get into that trade, you must have in mind that it's a short-term trade. Potentially, it can turn to long-term. Potentially, it may be the perfect entry. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't work in maybes. I try to work with what the trend is showing me and how I can be able to utilize what the trend is on. So that's why I don't really support this current gold trade. BTC, look at BTC, right? It started to give these structures here. People started to get in because it's looking like ICC, but it's not in sync with the overall trend. So you are most likely, even if price ends up going all the way, sometimes it just does stupid shit. All these things, it just takes you out, go your way, takes you out, go your way, and it's all because it's not in sync with the overall trend. Because when price is in sync with the overall trend, it doesn't break structures that it's creating. It sticks to that structures. But when it's not in sync with the overall trend, it can break structure and everything will still be okay. If that makes sense. It can break structures and everything will still be okay. So price moves in zones. Support and resistance are like zones where the buyers and sellers are at. So if price breaks one zone, it's going to go for the next zone. It breaks another zone, it's going to go for the next zone. And ICC is basically those zones, just different name. So ICC price breaks one zone. What is that? I don't know why I left that drawing. So ICC price breaks this zone, is price breaks here, shows you that hey, there's another zone here. So price back under this level, breaks under back under this zone, it's going for the next zone, which is this one that shows you that exists, right? If it breaks this zone, it's going to show you another zone. If it breaks another zone, like it just goes in zones basically. And because it goes in zones, you shouldn't base your trades fully on those zones. It's not a reliable information. You want to add something, you want to add the trend gives you even more edge, gives you even more confirmations, gives you even more courage to be able to hold your trade for the long term. I don't know if I've done justice to the explanation, but see you guys on the next one. ICC.